Step 49, 7-week scan. 4 weeks after your embryo transfer, you have a 7-week scan. Generally, the weeks in gestation in women who is not going on IVF is counted from first day of their last menstrual period. That's why when you do embryo transfer, you're already in 3 weeks of gestation according to that calculation. 4 weeks after the embryo transfer, you will be at 7 weeks of gestation when you should have your ultrasound scan for pregnancy. I will explain how embryos develop normally, then I will explain what you should see on ultrasound scan at 7 weeks gestation. Let us say you did embryo transfer, then after 10 days you checked your HCG levels, pregnancy test. If you have a positive pregnancy test, if your embryo is developing normally, at the time in the uterus you should have a gestational sac, that's fluid-filled sac. Of course you don't do scan at the time, it's just how normally embryos develop. You have a fluid-filled sac which should measure from 1 to 25 millimeter at the time. Then at 6 weeks of your gestation, then you should have a gestational sac which should measure more than 25 millimeters, and should have a yolk sac which is a fetal product, and you should have a fetal pole. Fetal pole means actual baby, and at the time you may or may not be able to see the heartbeat. Then 7 weeks of gestation, which is 4 weeks after your embryo transfer, you should see gestational sac which should be more than 25 millimeter in size. You should see yolk sac. You should see fetal pole of baby should measure half a centimeter or more, 5 millimeter or more, and you should see heartbeat which should be approximately 110 beats or higher per minute. This is what you expect in normal embryo development in IVF. And then you will have a 7-week scan. You should expect to see these parameters. When you have a 7-week scan, you should have a transvaginal scan by experienced sonographer who need to report on these 5 parameters: gestational sac, yolk sac, fetal pole, fetal heartbeat, and presence of perisac hematoma. In terms of gestational sac, they should write where they can see the gestational sac, whether it's inside the uterus, it's called intrauterine, or whether it's ectopic gestational sac. And also they should tell mean sac diameter of the sac, which should be more than 25 millimeter in size. Also they should see whether they can see the yolk sac. Seeing actual yolk sac means there's a baby developing. If in early pregnancy you may not be able to see fetal pole or baby, but if you see the yolk sac inside the gestational sac, that means actually this is a sac which containing baby. Then they need to report the size of the yolk sac. Then fetal pole, they should report whether they can see the baby. Here you can see this is called crown ramp length. That should be more than 5 millimeter in size. Ideally more than 7 millimeter in size at 7 weeks of gestation, and they can calculate the week of pregnancy according to this measurement called CRL. Then they should report if they can see the heartbeat. Essentially you should be able to see the heartbeat if CRL more than 7 millimeters. Then they report the heartbeat and how many beats per minute. And they also check if there is something called perigestational hematoma, perisac hematoma. So perisac hematoma can happen when your placenta is implanting on your endometrium, so you may have a leakage of blood, so you can see as a hematoma. So that needs to be recorded so that you can have a follow-up scan to make sure that hematoma hasn't increased in size and it's not causing any problems. Essentially, if your in terms of viability, you can diagnose this pregnancy is going well and viable if your mean sac diameter, gestational sac, is bigger than 25 millimeters, and if there is a fetal pole in it, and also baby's measurement more than 7 millimeters, and if you can see the heartbeat. If your gestational sac is smaller than 25 millimeters, then you need to repeat ultrasound scan and wait until it increases more than 25 millimeter before you can see the fetal pole. If it doesn't change within 1 to 2 weeks, then you may diagnose unfortunately with miscarriage. So again, if fetal pole is less than 7 millimeters, if you can't see the heartbeat, you cannot tell whether it's ongoing pregnancy or miscarriage. You need to wait another week or 2 until fetal pole increases to 7 millimeters, then check the heartbeat. If fetal pole doesn't increase in size within a week or two, then you may be diagnosed, unfortunately, with miscarriage. Essentially, after the scan, you get one of these three outcomes. One is a normal, viable pregnancy with a heartbeat. Then that means you can proceed to antenatal care. Your fertility specialist will refer you to obstetrician or your GP to start antenatal care. Second is uncertain outcome, which means it looks like this pregnancy is not developing according to plan, but it hasn't reached the criteria for diagnosis of miscarriage. For example, we cannot see the baby inside the sac, but the sac only measures 20 millimeters. Or we can see the baby, but we cannot see the heartbeat, but the baby's measurement is only 4 millimeters, which means it hasn't reached the criteria for miscarriage, and we can't be sure. Then we need to repeat HCG and repeat ultrasound scan at least 1 to 2 weeks after the scan. Unfortunately, this is very stressful time. You can't tell, you cannot diagnose whether it's ongoing pregnancy or whether that's miscarriage. And also, unfortunately, if you see the gestational sac more than 25 millimeters, if there isn't any fetal pole, if fetal pole is bigger than 7 millimeters, if you can't see the heartbeat, unfortunately you will be diagnosed with miscarriage. Then you need to be referred to gynecologist to manage the miscarriage. This is one of these three outcomes you can get on ultrasound scan. And of course, most likely outcome is ongoing pregnancy, and then you will be referred to antenatal care.